Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 3, harmonizing light and shadow to embody your mystical power and purpose. I'm your host, Washayla Sananda, and today I get to introduce you to the delightful Avalaura Gaither. Welcome, Avalaura.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have you, and I've been looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely.
But let me start with reading a little bit about what you're up to in the world so people can kind of understand where you're coming from. Avalaura Gaither is an internationally celebrated intuitive consultant and life coach who passionately assists individuals who dare to live their best lives. She guides clients through a powerful healing process that helps them discover who they are, who they wish to be, and how to get there. Avalaura is a licensed graduate social worker who holds a degree in psychology and a master's degree in social work. Additionally, she is a trained Reiki master, certified life coach, spiritual counselor, hypnotherapist, holistic aromatherapist, and yoga and meditation instructor. You're very well rounded.
I'm an overachiever. We can call it what it is. It's okay.
Indeed. Yes, you've done a lot. And so I'm looking forward to digging in with you. And especially because this is the first time I've had you on this show, I'd love to hear about your origin story and particularly what led you to practicing spirituality and what kind of, well, let's just start there. I don't want to add too much to that. That's plenty
Yeah,
to
I'm like, that's a loaded question. I'm like, where exactly do I begin? Oh my goodness, there's so many different ways I can take that. But just start just a little bit about me that wasn't in my bio, and thank you for that. I'm originally from Connecticut, and I live in the DC area now. I've been here for longer than I care to acknowledge at this point. But I went to Howard University, which brought me here. And I come from a very religious family, I'll say. I wouldn't say spiritual, but definitely religious. And I think, like a lot of people in America, particularly Black Americans, I grew up Christian. My dad is really interesting story. He is now a minister, although he wasn't when I was growing up, so I wasn't a preacher's kid or anything like that. But my parents were very active in the church. He was a deacon. My mom served, and now, he has since after I left and went to college, my father was actually in seminary school for 7 years. And so now he can pastor a church. He hasn't pastored his own church, but he has filled in for other pastors in different churches as needed. So I come from that background, and then also my grandparents were very active. My grandfather had a little kind of like hole in the wall church, if you could call it that. My grandmother was the church lady. She sold the cakes and, all of that, and the fried chicken and all that. So my family is very grounded in Christianity and religion. And it was very interesting for me, as the oldest of three children. My parents I think they would say they were kind of ill-equipped when they had me. And I think anybody who's the oldest, that, like, you're pretty much the experiment child. Like, your parents don't know what they're doing. And so that was sort of my parents' story. They tried to give me everything that they had. They're phenomenal parents. And like, most people who just don't know, they made a lot of mistakes as well along the way. And so their thing is religion has helped us, right? Education has helped us, which is why I am an overachiever. I come from a family of overachievers as well. They were first generation college. And so we're going to impart those same values onto our children. And so, me being the first, also being very headstrong and, coming out with a really strong sense of self pretty much from the beginning, even though I didn't necessarily know that. And so I tended to kind of bump heads with my parents on a lot of things, because where they were very traditional and had a way of seeing the world, I had my own way, and very much a risk taker and willing to do things a little different, because I was very clear that my love language is freedom, and I wanted to live life on my own terms. And so when they tried to get me to really embrace Christianity, I was like, nope, I don't like it. It doesn't resonate with me. That just does not work for me. And so I kind of ventured into my own path. And I was always very spiritual. And so that was never the thing. I always felt very grounded and very connected to God. I had a lot of very interesting spiritual experiences when I was young. I'm a dreamer. So I do dream interpretation. I dream every night. And so I've always had these experiences. I just did not feel called to religion, at least at that point in time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. I was also raised in the Lutheran church and have that foundation. And it does take something. It takes some, I don't know if you want to call it courage or
Yes.
maybe a rebel spirit to
Yes.
break out of that.
Yes.
Yeah. So obviously you have some spiritual gifts. Were you aware of that when you were young, or did you become aware later?
It's so interesting because it's there's this saying like you don't know what you don't know, right? And so if you don't have any teachers, if you don't have any mentors, if you don't have anybody saying, "Hey, wow, you can do that. I've never heard of that." You really don't know. And so your experience is simply your experience and it seems normal until you get older and you start to talk to other people and form relationships and you're like, wow, maybe that's not so normal. So I didn't really know at the time. I knew there was something to it, but I couldn't I had no idea what it was. And it really wasn't until years later, after I went to college, after I got my master's degree, after I started sort of my own healing journey, that I just started to discover a lot of things about myself.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. When when you're particularly when you go to school and start talking about things. For me, that was when I realized, oh, I might see the world a little differently than
A
the
little
other
bit.
kids do. Yeah, and so that just continues throughout life. So I know that everybody into each life, some shadow must fall, right? So I know that there have been things in your world and in your life that have shown up as the shadow side. Did you have something? Was there like a major or more than one possibly thing in your life that had you kind of realize, oh wow, in order to really be the person that I want to be in the world, I need to get over this or get through this. And then I'd love to just hear about that first and then kind of find out how you dealt with that.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I think it shows up very different for most people. And so what's interesting about me in sort of doing this work, doing this healing work, a lot of times people think that healers, therapists, life coaches, social workers, mental health professionals. A lot of us get into this profession because we have our own problems, right? And I've seen this show up. We have our own problems, and so a lot of times, because we're trying to figure out our own problems, now we want to help other people. But with me, I had a very strong sense of self at a very early age, and I knew that I wouldn't have called myself a healer then, but again, like I said, I was the oldest of three children. I was always advising people and helping people. And when I found out I could make money doing it, I was like, oh, well, heck, sign me up. That's what I'm going to do. Like, I knew that was a gift of mine. I didn't know all these other gifts, but I knew that was definitely one. And so, and like I said, I'm an overachiever. I will admit it, a recovering perfectionist. So if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it 215, 20%. It's just that's how I was raised, how I was built, and really kind of worked myself out of, I'm just gonna do it and it's gonna be as good as I can, and that's gonna be okay. But it took me a while to get to that point. Um, and so what happened is when I decided that my initial goal was to go into psychology and get a PhD and that whole thing, and that didn't work out. So I went to social work, got my master's degree, and ended up in the mental health profession. I was working at an outpatient mental health clinic. And I started feeling like, what the heck am I here for? Like, this is not what I signed up for. I can't really help people here. It was a lot of Medicaid billing and just giving people prescriptions for X, Y, and Z drug. And there wasn't, and even though I was providing counseling and doing all this work, I did not see myself making an impact. And I realized that instead of being able to help people heal, that the system was really set up to help people to maintain their dysfunction. And that's not what I signed up for. And I became very depressed. I felt stuck. I felt powerless. And I felt like this is what I worked so hard for. I did what everybody told me to do. I got the degrees, I got the certifications, I've done all this work. And how did I end up in this place? And at the same time, everybody's like, well, why are you upset? Like, you got this great job, you're making good money, you're married, you got your house, the not the 2.5 kids, right? But like the quote unquote American dream. And so I felt very alone in my depression and my feelings, because I felt like I should be happy, but I'm really not. And so a lot of things came out from that standpoint of really staying stuck in that place for a while and feeling helpless and not knowing what to do, and then finally reaching out for help, one of my friends, and saying, look, I'm not happy, I can't do this, I'm putting on weight, like I'm not this, I can't live like this anymore. And she was like, hey, you know what, I'm having this women's retreat, why don't you just come on out and join us? And I was like, cool, whatever. If she had said let's go hang gliding, I probably would have gone, because at that point I was just, when you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired, like I'm going to do whatever it takes. And that's where I was. And so I went on this women's retreat. And that's when I really learned the value of self-care. I talk a lot about soulful self-care, and it made me see just how out of harmony I was with myself. I was there for a weekend with these women. It was amazing. I got to spend time in nature, got back to meditation and yoga, and just breathing, right? Just getting out of this space of discontent and, oh, woe is me and all that stuff. And I literally had an emotional breakdown. I'll just call it for what it is. It was an emotional breakdown. And I found myself on my hands and knees crying out to God, like, you have to get me out of here. I can't live like this. I cannot do this. Like, I feel like I'm going to die. And and that was a surreal moment, because I finally admitted to myself really what was going on. At that point I hadn't really truly admitted what was happening, and I felt better. After you cry and you let it all out, you feel good, it's cleansing. And then I realized, like, oh shoot, I got to go back to work on Monday. like this is my life. And that's what I did. I had this powerful weekend. I went back to work on Monday, business as usual. And my boss calls me into his office, and he sits me down and he says, Avalaura, it's been great having you, but I gotta let you go. And I was like, what? Like, me? Overachiever, perfectionist, right? Like, I've done so much for this company, I can't believe that. And my ego was pissed, like just going on and on and on in my ear. How dare he? I can't believe this is happening. But then something really powerful happened, in that my spirit kicked in and said, Avalaura, why are you upset? This is what you prayed for. So what are you going to do about it? And that's really when the work began for me. What am I going to do about it? It was like, am I going to stay stuck in the matrix, right? And take the blue pill, or am I going to leave this and take the red pill, and just really cultivate the life on my terms? And that's what I decided to do, to take a real faith walk. Because again, I come from a family of, you get educated, you get your degrees, you get a job, you stay at this job for 30 years, you retire, you get your 401k, and that's your life. And I realized that was never going to work for me. And so now I had to do the work of defining life on my own terms. And I literally took what I call my 6-month healing sabbatical. And I tell everybody, like, I understand, it's hard and we have so many responsibilities, but that was one of the best things that I ever did for myself. I took a solid 6 months to do the work. Who am I? Why am I here? What is it I've been called to do? How can I make an impact in this world? How can I truly live life on my terms? And that's when I did my life coaching certification, my Reiki training, hypnotherapy, all those things that you talked about, yoga, meditation, all those things, and really got deep in tune with myself. And I came out of that, And in November of 2005, I opened up Avalauras Healing Center, and I have never looked back.
Hmm. Wow, that's incredible. So you took that, what other people might see as a failure or, like a really low moment of getting fired, even though you didn't want to be there, didn't have another plan, and you transformed yourself. And that must have taken a lot of courage to take 6 months of down, like not working and just going for the transforming yourself. And that's alchemy. You went from sort of the straight and narrow life of what you're quote unquote supposed to be doing, and then you said there's something else for me, and just completely did an about face, went into the realm of spirituality, and then created your own business out of it. How beautiful.
Yeah.
And so do you see people in person as well as train and coach online?
Absolutely. I mean, now with COVID, not so much. But yes, virtually, yes. But when things are, we, I'm gonna say the new normal, because things are never gonna be the way that they were, right? And so we're kind of going through that alchemy period right now. But yes, when things are, we establish our new normal, I will be seeing people in person again. But right now, everything is virtual.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So many people have had to pivot their businesses,
Absolutely.
and that also takes it, a leap
Yes.
of faith and some tenacity and courage to be able to transform a formerly in-person business to be functional as a virtual business.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, and you're right, and fortunately I pivoted early. But what was beautiful is that a lot of my work was virtual anyway.
Mhm.
I have so many clients that are literally out in other countries, and so for me it wasn't challenging. It was more challenging, I think, for my clients who were used to coming in person to now saying, "Hey, we got to work virtually." But I already had systems in place to work virtually, so it was beautiful to say, "Okay, well, now we got to pivot and do this."
Yeah, that's really fortunate that you were able to do that. And I know, everybody who was ready for that was very blessed
Yeah.
to have the, I mean, myself included. I had gone from pretty much 80% in person, and the
Hmm.
year before COVID hit, I had gone about 90% virtual, or 80 to
Wow.
90. So it was, and that was all spirit led.
Yeah.
I was just fortunately ahead of the curve on that. The blessings of meditation and listening to guidance,
And
right?
listening. That's the key, listening.
Yeah, that was very helpful for me, and but I feel for everyone who has struggled through all of it as well.
Mhm.
So, I'd love to hear a little bit about your hypnotherapy practice. Is that something you practice, and is it traditional hypnotherapy, or is it, I've had experience with QHHT and beyond quantum healing. Is it that, tell me more about what you do in
Yeah, so
hypnotherapy.
hypnotherapy is not something that it's probably something I integrated more into the work that I do.
Mhm.
So I would say most of my practice is really life coaching and energy healing. And the hypnotherapy can really fall into that energy healing space. And so a lot of it is customized. I have packages like anybody else, but one of the things that I really love to do is tune into my client and look at what they need and provide that. And so it was always so important to me to have a lot of different tools. And so then I said, you know what, you could really benefit from hypnotherapy. So let's integrate that into the work that we're doing together. But it's not a standalone practice that I do. It's really more so customized for my clients and what they need. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because we were literally just talking about that today online.
Mm. Yeah, I know. I for myself, I've been through, and it's probably a different, totally, like maybe a totally different type of hypnotherapy than what you do, but like past life regression,
Yep, we were just
and
talking about that.
you do things. It's really must have been tuning in. Like I know there's a question about this floating around. So tell me about that. Is that something you take people into? Like, can you look at, have them, help them find issues coming up from past life experiences or future, or some, off planet or something like that?
So it's so interesting because I literally, and I don't know why it keeps coming up. I gotta think about that. I have to look into to that right now. So that literally just came up online, and it came up with one of my clients last week. I do not do past life regression. I have had it done. I know how to do it, but it's not something that I do a lot with. And I think it's really because I've just seen a lot more powerful results doing other things. I do spiritual work as well. And for me, that's far more powerful than past life regression. And, the truth is because I have this sort of mental health background, with the healing background, I really believe that it's important to work through what's going on right now. And I know sometimes people can point to and say, well, it came up in past life. But the truth is, if you have somebody who's really good at what they do, they can help you to go through what it is right now. You don't even have to look at your past lives. And if it really is a past life thing, if you heal it now, you're healing it in the past lives.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really important to get a professional or a healer who is really good at what they do so that they're not limited. And so because I tune into my clients, I can see things very, very quickly. That usually something like past lives, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do it. Because I can really see what's going on pretty much relatively quickly. And so when I do the spiritual work, that's more so, well, because there's a spiritual problem. And so we have to do spiritual work to fix it. But I can pretty much see relatively quickly, like, yeah, this is a spiritual issue, where this is more a mental issue, this is an emotional issue, this is a physical issue. And so really matching the energy of whatever the particular issue is, that's how you have to solve it.
Okay. And make a distinction for me between what are you referring to when you say spiritual work versus, one of the other types of
And it can all work together too. So
uh-huh.
it's not even, yeah, it can all work together. So spiritual work is addressing things that are happening on the spiritual plane. So it could look like, well, one, readings for sure. So people wanting clarity in terms of what's going on in their life, having specific questions. And so that's something that could definitely be akin to like a past life thing. But when you're doing a reading, it's really looking spiritually at what's happening that we see manifesting on earth,
Mhm,
essentially.
mhm.
And then the spiritual work is actually if there is a problem on the spiritual level, or it may not even be a problem, it may be an enhancement. It might be, you know what, I want to manifest more money. I want to manifest my ideal mate. I want to manifest my perfect job. So it could be things like that as well. And you can do work on the spiritual plane to manifest those things. But it could also be on the dark side of things that, and some people may not believe in it. You don't need to, but truth is truth. But there are different, would you call it black magic, or in the black, we might call it roots or voodoo or whatever name that you give it. But people literally doing negative spiritual things to other people that are causing them problems in their life. From it could be problems with their job and their relationships, with their health, so many different things. And so you have that dark energy as well as dark spirits and negative spirits and things like that. So it can get very deep down the rabbit hole.
So do you do clearing of, what people might call curses or spells or
Mhm.
entities? And what do you do when someone comes to you and they have that issue?
The first thing I do is a reading, because sometimes people will come to you and say, "Oh, I went to this psychic over here and I went here and they told me this." And I'm like, I don't really care what anybody, I need to see what's going on. It's I liken it to a doctor. If you go to one doctor and they give you, they say you have this, you need to go to another doctor, you get a different opinion. And they have to do their own tests and things to see what's going on. And so it's the same thing. So it starts with the reading to really look at what is happening here. And then from there, I can kind of quote unquote, sort of spiritually diagnose and say, okay, this is an issue, and this is the prescription. This is what we need to do for that particular issue. I will be honest that I really don't like to do that work. I do it. I know how to do it. I actually have a team, but it can be very taxing
Mhm.
on every level. And I think because we've been so we don't really understand the spiritual world. You know, I tell people all the time, we have like a kindergarten education when it comes to spirituality. And so, because there's so many mistruths and so many misconceptions, part of it in the beginning is a lot of education. Because we tend to think that, oh, this is just going to be some easy thing, or you can go in with some sage and clear it out. It doesn't really work that way. And so it's a lot of education, as well as this is what's going on with you, but this is what that really looks like. And this is what the process can look like.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, and there are so many ways to go about it. I was trained in introspective hypnosis, and a part of that is to go in and see if an individual, you actually take them into the hypnotic state, and
Mhm.
then if there's something that's been bothering them, you can find out if there's, an energy or an energetic being attached to them,
Mhm.
and or that they're harboring, which oftentimes that is the case.
Yeah.
And then you can do that release. Now I don't do those sessions myself. I took the course because I wanted to deepen my ability
Mm.
to lead guided meditation. But
Mhm.
now when I do have someone that comes to me with a lot of, like, I can tell they're carrying some energies that are really heavy for them. And if I think, okay, you really need to go deep, I send them to my mentor and
Mhm.
he helps them, and it's very helpful, and then they can come back. I do guided meditations and things for that.
Mhm.
But it sounds like you have a recipe and a technique for helping
Yeah.
people clear. Is there anything that you could share that would be helpful to people, just kind of more of a general thing that anybody could practice at home, that if somebody's feeling some heavy energy or having a hard time navigating the heavy energy around them, do you have any, like, guidance or techniques that you could offer?
It's really challenging on that level, right? Because we're talking about, I'm literally working mind, body, spirit, soul. And so when it's on a lower level, I call it, in terms of, there's things that you're carrying emotionally or mentally. There's definitely things that I could say, yes, do that at home. But when it's spiritual, it's outside of pray and get help. It's hard to, people mess a lot of things up, and actually that ends up being a problem. Like, I remember I had a client who did a cord cutting for his brother and ended up unleashing all of these entities, not intentionally, but he was reading his book and he decided to do it, and he caused so much harm and havoc, that if he had just gone to a professional in the beginning, that would have never have happened. So I'm very leery of trying to tell people, hey, you can do this at home. You really shouldn't.
Wow, okay.
And I'm always honest. Like, I'm not gonna, yeah, but you shouldn't. If it's just like anything else. I mean, if something happens to my car, I am not gonna try to diagnose my car or go on Google and figure it out. I'm going to my mechanic. I don't know what I'm doing. And so when it comes to certain things, just get help.
Right,
Just
yeah,
get
don't try this at
professional
home, in
help, I
other
should
words.
say. Professional help. Get professional help.
Right, right. Well, and I practice shamanism and cord cutting. I've never heard of anyone, like, just accidentally unleashing, but
That's me. That's what he said.
yeah. Yeah, who knows what really went down, huh?
I'm just using his words.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because the theme of this show is about the harmonizing of light and shadow to embody your mystical power and purpose. What do you do in your life and you're working with people all the time, so inevitably, you kind of collect energy.
Yeah.
How do you release? How do you harmonize the chaos around you? Do you have a special technique or routine that you do to keep your energy clear and keep yourself balanced?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so many of us, even if we're not doing this work, we're very empathic. Like, I get a lot of clients who are empathic. And so, COVID in one respect has been good because we haven't been around as much people, right? So it's kind of given us that space. But normally it can be very taxing. And so for me, one of the things that I do is, like I said, I really talk about soulful self-care and making sure that you're practicing self-care on your own terms. The first word in self-care is self. And I think a lot of times what happens is we think it's supposed to look a certain way, but really it's about what is going to work best for you. And so I have taken the time to cultivate my own routine and as needed, change it up and say, what, that's not really working for me right now. Let me switch that out and do something else over here. And so I definitely do a lot of tuning into myself and listening to my body, and just making sure that I'm grounded and I'm centered and I'm okay. Because it's very easy to start off your day and feel amazing, and then something happened through the course of my day, and all of a sudden my energy is low, and I'm like, wait, what happened? And so I think it's important through the course of the day to do an energy check. Check on yourself. What's going on? How are you feeling in your body? Take a few deep breaths. Are you feeling any kind of pain or discomfort or something in your body? And where did that come from? Is that your stuff, or did that come from somebody else, or did it come from an environment that you were in, or were you just in a meeting where somebody said something that pissed you off, right? So really doing self checks like that. I also spend a lot of time in nature. That's really important to me. And even if it's just sitting outside, especially like I said, during this time, although I love the water, like the water is my jam. If I can get by a lake or an ocean or the falls or something like that, the water is so important to my spirit. And really just making sure that I'm taking time out to be introspective. I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. We talk about meditation, and I love meditation. I teach meditation. It is so important, but it's also important just to take time out to be introspective and just look at the course of your day. Look at how you're feeling. Look at how you're thinking. Are there things that are coming up, downloads that you haven't tuned into because you've been going through your day and you're just doing busy work and you haven't taken that time? And for me, that looks a little different than meditation, where I'm really concentrating on my breath and being in my body and centering myself. But the introspection is just taking time out to just kind of sit with myself and just be for a moment.
Mm, yeah, that's so important. And I know for me, my special thing that I do throughout the day, especially when I'm doing a lot of online work, like I have been lately, I'll take sunshine breaks. I live in sunny
Mm,
Florida, so
I
I
wish.
have the good fortune to be able to
I
walk
wish.
out and soak up some sun, and pretty much any time of year, but especially this time of year, it's really beautiful. Got to go to the beach for the sunset last night. And it's just, yeah, it's so important to get some nature time. And
Yeah.
even if you live in a big city, go to the park or go a little bit out of town if you can, and soak up some of the nature vibes. It's so balancing. There's nothing else like nature. And I agree with you on the water. I
Yeah.
love to be around and near water and find it very balancing, and just an ocean air, it to me is so
Yeah. So I had to escape. So I know a lot of people weren't traveling during COVID, but I went to Florida and I went to LA because I was like, I need water. I couldn't get out of the country. So I was like, where can I go? I need water. I need the ocean. I need the sun. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got the purple in your world like I do. And so for me, being a galactic shaman, I have recollection of being on Sirius B, which is the water world, and it has a purple sky, and a lot of the water's got this purple cast to it. And I always feel like, home when I'm around the ocean because I have memories from being there. So I think a lot of people that are drawn to purple and the water are the same kins, from Sirius, and or at least have memories from there. We're also multidimensional.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, I'd love to talk about, how you stepped into your personal power and owning your inner mystic. I know coming from a church family myself, it can be a little scary to tell your family, especially if they're not in the world of, spirituality, or they're worried that it might be something negative. How did you overcome that? If you did have a hurdle with your family, how did you overcome that? And how did you find the self-empowerment to be able to step forward and say, you know what, this is who I truly am. I'm spiritual, not so much religious. This is my connection, and I'm just going to be out about it. Because I know a lot of people are out there feeling like, it's kind of like being in the closet, like I want to tell people, but I don't, or it can be scary, or, so like, where did you find that empowerment for yourself?
Yeah, that really truly, that was a lot of my healing work. Learning, I think it was one powerful for me to really be aware of who I was in my totality. That was first. I was aware of some of my gifts, like I said, but I wasn't aware of all of my gifts. And as I became more aware of who I was and my gifts and my purpose, there's a lot of strength and courage that comes just from that place of knowingness and being clear. And so that was a huge part of it. And then, of course, it was like, well, hell, what do I do with all this? Right. Like, well, you're a healer and you can do this. And okay, well, what I do? But so part of my strength came from that level of awareness at first. And then as I just educated myself, but also learned and studied, and that, that's why I do have so many certifications and things, because I literally just immersed myself, and there was a lot of power in that as well. So learning all of these different facets of myself and human nature, and learning about other people, and just feeling like, wow, like I don't see a lot of people doing this, especially at that time, because you got to think like now, yeah, that might be like, oh yeah, I know 10 people, 20 people do that. But this was 15 years ago. And on top of that, you also have to add that I'm Black. If y'all ain't figured that out, I'm a Black woman. In the Black community, especially at that time, nobody was talking about Reiki. Nobody was talking about yoga, meditation. We were talking about spiritual stuff. Definitely not talking about that. It was very taboo. And it was, and I heard things like, oh no, I can't practice yoga because my pastor said it's going to open me up to spirits. Or what's that Reiki stuff? No, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, didn't Jesus heal? I mean, I don't know, but I think they talked about that in the Bible. So if that means that people have these gifts, and, yes, there are definitely negative people, negative energies, negative entities. Absolutely. I would never say that that's not true. But there's also people who this is their God-given gift. And they've been given this gift to help others like yourself. And so for me, it was really immersing myself in my own healing, and working through childhood stuff, and receiving my own coaching and counseling. And so a combination of doing all of those different things gave me the strength and the courage to really show up as myself fully and completely. And I could not have done it without that work. I couldn't, because I didn't see anybody who looked like me. I still don't really see anybody who looks like me. So it was so important for me to do that work so that I could show up as me. And now a lot of my students, a lot of my clients are Black women. They're like, wow, I love what you're doing. And I really don't see anybody doing this. And they gravitate towards me because they're like, thank you for being, that shining light to show us that, like, you can really do this work and be successful and be happy and live life on your terms.
Beautiful. Yeah, you really spoke into, I think the most important thing is living life on your own terms. And when you do that, you get to be an example for the people in your community and the people that are wanting to do the same thing, but maybe don't have the courage, or don't feel like they can, or don't feel empowered to do it. So I know myself included. And for anyone watching, if you're still like kind of holding yourself back because you feel like, oh, I don't know, that's, people might judge me or whatever, my family might not understand, or whatever the stories are that you tell, you, by stepping into your truth and your self-empowerment and allowing that truth to be what you're all about and share it, you're helping so many other people.
Right.
Life is sacred, and there is something that you could be doing every day that makes you happy and lights you up and allows you to contribute your gifts to the world. And
Absolutely.
so it's worth exploring that, because every minute is important, and we need to love what we do and love our lives to be happy people. So one thing you talked a lot about is that self-care. And I know that's interesting because it's come up from a lot of the different people that I've talked to, talk about now more than ever that self-care is so important. And if you're going to balance and harmonize your energy at this time, then you've got to take care of yourself first.
We do talk a lot about self-care, and for me, in the mental health space, is something that we've been talking about for years, even though it's now just kind of like coming up and starting to sound a little cliche. Everybody's talking about it, but we've always had to talk about this, because when you are a healer, when you're a mental health professional and you're in service, you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself, because you can get so drained by your clients and the work that you're doing, because a lot of us have a very limited view about what self-care looks like. And so it really helps to widen your view by asking you these questions to see, how are you practicing? Are these the things that you're doing? And where do you fall in the self-care spectrum? Do you need to bump it up and do more? Are you good? Or, are you realizing like, well, I don't even know what self-care is. Let me find that out first.
And so, like, what are some of the ways that people can really achieve a balanced life, like with self-care?
hmm So one of the things that I talk about, and it's especially now is so interesting, is that your self-care has to match the level of your stress.
Mm.
It has to match the level of your stress. And so what I mean by that is, if you just lost your job per se or something, and or you lost a loved one, right? A lot of people are experiencing a lot of loss. Going to the salon to get a mani pedi is not going to cut it. That is not enough self-care. Now, maybe in your normal everyday life, going and getting a mani pedi is great. But if you've experienced something on that level, now you need to bump up your self-care, and maybe you need therapy. Maybe you need grief counseling. Maybe you need coaching. And so understanding that it needs to match. So if your stress level is at a level 5, your self-care should be at a 5. If your stress level is at a level 10, your self-care must be at a level 10. And so that way you're not falling into superficial self-care where you think you're taking care of yourself, but it's really not enough. And you're like, well, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing all this stuff to take care of myself, but maybe you're not doing the right things, because you really need more at this particular time.
And I know particularly for people, when you do, let's say if you lose a job, for instance, that's the last thing you want to do is go spend more money on massage and other things, because that fear comes up. But yet that's exactly when you need to up it. And sometimes, you can do trades or work something out too. So definitely don't skimp on the self-care when you're going through something intense in your life and you need that help. There's always a way. There's always a way to get that
Always.
help. Yeah.
Always. Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, like, so when I lost my job back then, like afterwards, I went and took a belly dance class. I was already in class, but I was like, you know what? I need to dance. Like, I need to do something. And so you're right, you have to do something. And you're right, you can't be scared to spend that money or put yourself out there, because sometimes that's really exactly what you need to get through that particular time. And not just get through it, but do what I did and transform it, and you allow it to transform your life.
Oh my gosh, I love that you did belly dance. You went and took
I sure did.
dance when you got depressed because you needed more joy. Like, that's a perfect prescription of, okay, I feel sad. What can I do? Well, you need more joy. Go dance, go sing, go play, go have some fun, take a vacation, right?
This is your life, and you get to live it, and you get to decide how you're going to live it. So you don't have to stay stuck in any situation where you are not happy or not comfortable or not whole or complete, you get to change that.
Indeed. Yes. I love that. And I love the self-empowerment of that.
It's important for people to remember that you do have options, and you do get to live life on your own terms, not according to how your daddy said, your mama, your
Mhm.
siblings, any friends. You get to live life on your own terms. And that's the beauty of this thing. And take the time to explore and figure out what that means. Like, that is the fun in life. And so, one of my clients says that, life just keep lifing, like there's always going to be things that comes up, there's always going to be things that happen, some that we can control, some that we can't. But if you are living life on your own terms, you will feel so much freer and happier, and be able to pivot and go with the flow so much more, just because you're in a good space with yourself.
I really appreciate our conversation today, Avalaura. It was really wonderful getting to know you and share
Good.
you with the audience. Thank you for your generosity and for everything you've shared.
Thank you for having me, I loved it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I appreciate you all. Thank you so much, and namaste.
Namaste.